The grand ballroom of the Capitol Skyline Conference Center was buzzing with anticipation. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above rows of velvet-covered VIP chairs. Journalists, dignitaries, and staff moved like clockwork in practiced harmony. The moment felt like history waiting to be written. Karoline Leavitt, dressed in a crisp navy pantsuit, walked in with a quiet confidence. Her heels clicked on the marble floor as she scanned for her name. Second row, aisle seat, just behind the keynote podium. Perfect. She placed her clutch under the chair and took her seat, heart racing. This was more than politics. It was presence. Across the room, Jasmine Crockett's arrival stirred the air. Whispers followed her like ripples in a still lake. She was a rising star, bold, unapologetic, magnetic. Karoline leaned toward her aide, whispering, "Let's keep it quiet today, just observe." But then, a suited man with an earpiece approached. "Ms. Leavitt, I'm sorry, we need you to move, the seat is reassigned." Karoline froze. "To whom?" He avoided her eyes. "Congresswoman Crockett." Gasps rippled around her, her seat, taken, no explanation. And this was only the beginning. The lights dimmed and murmurs faded to silence as Jasmine Crockett entered the ballroom, flanked by aides and local security. Her red blazer gleamed under the spotlights. Every step was deliberate, every glance calculated. She knew the cameras were watching, and she played to them. Karoline, now seated 3 rows back, tried to hold her composure, but her chest was tight, fingers stiff against the armrest. From here, the podium felt like a different world. "Why would they do this?" her aide whispered. "That was your confirmed spot." Karoline's reply came slow, almost dazed. "It's political, or personal." Jasmine glanced over her shoulder and met Karoline's gaze briefly. There was something in her eyes, regret or recognition, but she looked away before anything more could be read. Backstage, tensions were mounting. The coordinator's headset crackled with static. "We've got a problem," someone hissed into the mic. The guest list was overridden. "By who?" the producer snapped. Silence. Karoline noticed the backstage staff pacing, exchanging harsh whispers, pointing at clipboards and then toward her old seat. Something was wrong, and it wasn't just a seat change. The crowd clapped politely as Jasmine took the stage, but backstage, pressure had reached a boiling point. The event director, veins pulsing at his temple, whispered frantically into his earpiece. "I said no overrides. Who let her change the list?" The assistant stammered. "We thought it came from corporate, or DC." The director's eyes narrowed. "This isn't protocol, it's sabotage." Back in the audience, Karoline sat still, outwardly calm, inwardly spiraling. She felt displaced, not just from a seat, but from purpose. This wasn't supposed to happen, not today. Suddenly, a voice crackled over the ballroom's internal comm system. A staffer's voice, unmuted by mistake. "We're being blamed for this. They're cleaning house. Everyone's fired." Whispers turned to stares. The ballroom, once elegant and composed, now hummed with invisible tension. Karoline stood, her eyes locked on the staff rushing out the side exit, some in tears, others in disbelief. What had she unknowingly walked into? She reached for her phone. Her screen lit up with a message. "You were never meant to be there." Karoline stepped outside the ballroom, the muffled applause from inside clashing with the cold, sterile hallway air. Her heels echoed against the polished granite tiles as she walked toward the green room. Staff were packing things in a hurry. Binders, laptops, even untouched water bottles tossed into boxes. She caught a young coordinator wiping tears as she crammed headsets into a duffel bag. "What happened?" Karoline asked gently. The woman looked up. "They told us we breached protocol, but we didn't. We followed the original guest list. Then someone changed it, and blamed us." Karoline frowned. "Who ordered the change?" The woman hesitated, then whispered a name like it was a confession. "Alston." Karoline froze. Alston Grant, the political strategist known for backdoor moves and cutting deals in the shadows of Washington. But why would he? The woman shook her head. That's what we don't know. But he wanted you moved, and Jasmine in. Karoline's phone buzzed again. This time, no message, just a calendar invite titled, Crockett Private Briefing, Room 6B. No press. Her heart pounded. Was this where the answers lay? Karoline stood outside Room 6B, a nondescript wooden door in a quiet wing of the conference center. Her hand hovered over the knob. Inside, muffled voices argued. Why wasn't she briefed? One said, low and tense. She wasn't supposed to be here at all, another snapped. Karoline stepped back. The hallway smelled faintly of lemon polish and tension. She reached into her bag and pressed record on her phone, just in case. She knocked once. The voices silenced. The door creaked open and Jasmine Crockett stood there. Karoline blinked. Congresswoman. Jasmine didn't flinch. Her face softened, almost sadly. You weren't supposed to see this. I wasn't supposed to be moved either, Karoline said quietly. Behind Jasmine stood Alston Grant himself, arms folded, eyes like stone. We didn't expect the fallout, Jasmine said. It was supposed to be symbolic, a small gesture. Small? Karoline's voice cracked. You humiliated me. People lost their jobs. Jasmine stepped aside. Then come in, hear everything, or walk away and never know the real reason. Karoline took one step forward. The room was dimly lit, more like a war room than a lounge. Maps of voter districts lined the walls. A projection screen glowed faintly with polling data. Alston stood behind the table, calm but calculating. You were a pawn, Karoline, he said, but not the way you think. Karoline crossed her arms. Then tell me. He gestured toward the screen. We needed Jasmine in that seat, not for her ego, for optics, unity, symbolism. But it wasn't supposed to cost us staff. That was collateral. Karoline's jaw clenched. Collateral? Those were people. Alston ignored her. You're sharp. You held your ground. That didn't go unnoticed. Jasmine leaned in. What if this wasn't a takedown, but a test? Karoline blinked. A test? Alston nodded. We need someone with backbone who can handle public fire and still walk back into the room. What happened today wasn't the end. It was your audition. Silence fell like a curtain. Karoline looked between them, torn between insult and intrigue. Was this betrayal, or the beginning of something bigger? Karoline sat at the edge of a leather chair, her hands folded, thoughts racing like thunderclouds. The offer lingered in the air like incense, mysterious and heavy. You want me to work with you? She asked Alston. It's not just working with us, he said, pacing slowly. It's rewriting the narrative. Imagine a conservative voice reshaping bipartisan messaging. Imagine being the reason these two sides finally sit down. Jasmine chimed in. You were removed from that seat because you made people uncomfortable, in a good way. They noticed. Now we're offering you more than a seat. We're offering a platform. Karoline glanced at the whiteboard filled with red circles and campaign strategy notes. It looked less like a plan and more like a chessboard. Why now? She asked quietly. Because no one's listening anymore, Jasmine said, and people like you could change that. It wasn't just strategy. It was personal. But Karoline couldn't ignore the image of the young woman crying outside, or the whisper of betrayal that clung to the walls. She looked up. If I say yes, I do it my way. Alston smiled. That's why we chose you. But Karoline couldn't shake the feeling. She hadn't been told everything. Later that evening, Karoline stood alone beneath the rotunda of Union Station, watching people come and go. Her reflection shimmered in the tall glass windows, uncertain, evolving. The meeting had ended quietly with promises of a follow-up and informal integration. But the real fallout had only just begun. Her phone buzzed, again. This time it wasn't from Jasmine or Alston. It was from one of the fired staffers, Marla, the teary-eyed coordinator. They think I leaked the guest list. Security came to my apartment. Please, can you help me? Karoline's stomach dropped. She'd been pulled into something larger than image strategy. Real people's lives were unraveling. As the wind swept through the station's massive arches, she replayed Alston's words. You were a pawn. She tapped her phone and dialed. Marla, it's Karoline. I believe you. A pause. I need you to meet me and bring everything you know. There was silence on the other end, then a soft, relieved breath. Okay. Karoline looked out over the Capitol skyline. This wasn't about a seat anymore. It was about truth. Karoline and Marla met at a corner table in a quiet cafe just off New Jersey Avenue, far from the bright lights of the Capitol. The air smelled of cinnamon and espresso, and the only sound was the soft clatter of mugs. Marla looked drained, her eyes hollow. They took my badge, my access. They said I compromised national security. Karoline leaned in. You didn't. I know you didn't. Marla hesitated, then pulled a small flash drive from her coat sleeve and slid it across the table. I saved the security logs. The guest list edits, time-stamped. It wasn't me. It wasn't anyone on staff. Karoline picked it up, feeling its weight far beyond plastic and circuits. Who was it then? Marla whispered. There's a hidden channel, a backdoor in the system, someone on the political side. High clearance. Karoline's blood chilled. She felt it now, not just tension, but danger. She stood. We need to get this to someone, but not just anyone. Marla looked up, her voice trembling. Who do you trust? Karoline paused, and for the first time in days, she didn't have an answer. The next morning, Karoline sat alone at a bench in Lincoln Park, fingers tightening around a cup of black coffee as the cold wind threaded through the trees. Children played near the statue while joggers passed by, oblivious to the storm she was stepping into. She plugged Marla's flash drive into her laptop. Files loaded, logs, timestamps, IP addresses, internal memos. Her eyes scanned quickly. One document caught her attention. Override authorization, priority access, event, Chair Alpha. Signed not by Alston, not even Jasmine, but Chief Liaison Director Simone Morrow, a name with silent power in D.C., a fixer with roots in both parties but loyalty to none. Karoline leaned back, exhaling sharply. A soft buzz interrupted her thoughts. A message from Jasmine. Karoline, can we talk? Somewhere quiet. Not official. She stared at the screen. Jasmine hadn't contacted her since the offer. Why now? Another ping came in, this time from an unknown number. Stop digging. You're already too far in. Her breath caught. Someone was watching, and suddenly, the park didn't feel so peaceful anymore. Later that afternoon, Karoline entered the Brass Rooster, a cozy brick cafe in Georgetown with dim lighting and high-backed leather booths. Jasmine was already seated in the corner, dressed down in a wool coat and sneakers. You got the message? Jasmine said without looking up. I got two, Karoline replied, sliding into the booth. One from you and one warning me to stop digging. Jasmine's jaw tightened. I was afraid of that. There was a long silence, filled only by the low hum of jazz and the clink of coffee cups. Simone Morrow signed the override, Karoline finally said. Jasmine didn't flinch. Simone doesn't act alone. She's the cleaner, she moves pieces, but someone higher is pulling strings. Why bring me into this? Karoline whispered. Because you're outside the game. They didn't see you coming, but I did. Karoline leaned forward. Then help me. Help me clear Marla's name. Expose what really happened. Jasmine looked around cautiously, then slid a napkin across the table. On it, scribbled in pen, follow the funding. Check the donor files, room 4C, Capitol Archives. Karoline folded the napkin into her coat. She didn't know it yet, but that lead would change everything. It was nearly midnight when Karoline slipped past the quiet halls of the Capitol Archives, her press pass giving her just enough clearance to get in, but not to access the restricted donor logs. Room 4C sat behind a keypad door. She typed in the override code Jasmine had texted an hour earlier. The lock clicked. Inside, filing cabinets lined the walls. It smelled of dust, metal, and secrets. She opened a drawer marked Tier 1 Contributions, Private Allocation, and flipped through folders until she found one labeled Event, Chair, Alpha, Emergency Appropriation. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside were names, donation trails, offshore accounts, and on one receipt, a direct deposit from a defense contractor to an event PR firm listed under Simone Morrow's shell company. It wasn't just about optics. The event had been leveraged to funnel influence. Moving Karoline out of the seat had nothing to do with Jasmine, and everything to do with who was seen and what they'd endorse. A noise behind her. Karoline turned sharply. Footsteps. Then, the lights cut out. The archive room plunged into black. Karoline froze, heart hammering in her chest. Her eyes strained to adjust, but it was pitch dark. The quiet hum of the overhead lights was gone, replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the soft creak of a door slowly closing behind her. She pressed herself against the filing cabinet, holding the folder tight. Her breath came in shallow bursts. Footsteps echoed, measured, deliberate. Someone was in the room. Not a guard, not an archivist. She inched toward the corner, hands out to guide herself along the metal drawers. Her fingers grazed a switch. She flipped it. Nothing. She reached for her phone, screen dimmed low, and quickly took photos of the key pages in the folder. Every name, every dollar trail. Just as she finished, the footsteps stopped, right behind her. "Turn around slowly," a voice rasped. She did. A man in a gray suit, face obscured by a security cap, stood inches away. "Give me the file," he demanded. Karoline didn't move. Instead, she backed into the shelf, then slammed her elbow into it, toppling the contents onto him. And she ran. Karoline didn't stop running until she was blocks away from the Capitol, chest burning, lungs raw. She ducked into an alley behind a closed florist shop and pulled out her phone. Photos backed up. Location encrypted. Message sent to Jasmine. Within minutes, Jasmine responded, "Come to my apartment. It's time you knew everything." Karoline arrived at a high-rise in Navy Yard. Jasmine opened the door, barefoot, hair pulled back, wine glass in hand. She looked exhausted, like the weight of secrets had finally taken their toll. Jasmine led her inside. No aides, no staff. Just them. "I never wanted this to touch you," Jasmine said quietly. "You were collateral. The staff, Marla, the others, they were scapegoats. But the play was much bigger." Karoline sat. "I need the truth." Jasmine took a long breath. Simone was securing future contracts for a private logistics firm. They needed the optics of bipartisan unity. You were pulled to create the illusion of racial reconciliation. The seat was symbolic. "And the fallout?" Karoline asked. "They panicked. The story spread too fast. They fired the staff to kill the narrative." Karoline's eyes burned. "And you went along with it?" "I thought I had no choice." Karoline placed the printed photos from the archive on Jasmine's table. "We do have a choice. This isn't just politics, it's people's lives." Jasmine studied the documents, her face slowly hardening. "If this gets out, it'll bring down more than just Simone. Congress members, donors, media partners, they'll come for us." "Let them," Karoline said firmly. "They've been hiding too long." Jasmine stood pacing. "You want to go public?" "I want to go true," Karoline replied. There was a beat of silence. Then Jasmine nodded once. "We'll need protection. I know someone at the Atlantic. Trustworthy. You leak the photos, I go on the record." Suddenly, Karoline's phone rang. Unknown number again. She answered. A distorted voice spoke. "You've made a mistake, Ms. Leavitt. This is your final warning." Then the line went dead. Caroline's hands shook. Jasmine walked over. They're scared. That means we're close. Outside, the wind howled against the windows. The Capitol dome blinked in the distance like an ominous eye. They had the truth. Now came the battle to make it seen. The next morning, Caroline and Jasmine sat across from investigative reporter Lila Vaughn in a sunlit corner of the Atlantic's downtown D.C. office. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the mall, but all eyes were fixed on the documents now spread across the table. Layla flipped through each page carefully, her jaw tightening with every revelation. "This is massive," she whispered. "Campaign finance manipulation, strategic seeding for narrative control, falsified security memos?" Caroline nodded. "And it's only the surface, there's video too." Jasmine recorded her final meeting with Simone. Lila looked at Jasmine. "You're sure you want to go on record?" Jasmine's hands trembled, but her voice didn't. "I need to. I was complicit. It ends now." Lila leaned back. "Okay, I'll fast-track the piece. We go live at 8 a.m. tomorrow." As they left the building, Caroline felt a flicker of hope. But it didn't last. That night, her hotel room door was ajar when she returned. Her laptop, gone. A single piece of paper sat on the nightstand. "This is your final chance to walk away." Dawn broke cold and gray over Washington. At 7:59 a.m., Caroline sat in her car outside the Capitol, phone clutched in hand. Jasmine's live interview was cued on the Atlantic site. At 8 a.m., it went public. Her voice echoed from the screen. "I was used. I allowed it. And I'm done protecting people who hurt others for gain." Within minutes, the internet caught fire. Twitter exploded with Karoline Crockett confession. Talk shows picked up the story. Journalists started digging into Simone's past and the firms she'd funneled government money toward. Caroline's inbox flooded. Invitations, threats, anonymous tips. Then came the press conference. Simone, hair perfectly curled, smiled like nothing had happened. Unfounded, bitter staff, a political stunt. But Jasmine wasn't done. She walked into the room mid-briefing unannounced. Silence swept over the crowd. Holding up a flash drive, she said, "Would you like to explain this phone call, Simone? Or shall I play it for them?" Simone froze. Caroline watched from her phone as gasps echoed in the chamber. Then her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. "Nice move," the voice growled, "but this isn't over." By nightfall, the narrative had changed. Simone resigned. An independent inquiry was launched. Caroline's phone was still buzzing, some congratulating her bravery, others warning her to stay quiet if you value your future. But she didn't feel fear anymore. She felt conviction. In a cafe tucked in a Georgetown corner, Jasmine slid a manila envelope across the table. From an old friend in the FBI, everything we couldn't find, and a letter of interest. Caroline opened it, a government seal at the top, a formal invitation to join a bipartisan ethics council, investigative capacity, oversight powers. "You're kidding," Jasmine smiled. "They want someone with fire, someone who doesn't back down." Caroline looked out the window at the glowing Capitol dome. "This all started with a seat, just one seat." Jasmine nodded. "And you stood back up." They clinked coffee mugs. In the distance, the sound of car horns and laughter blended with the city's pulse. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. If you were moved by this story, hit that like button and subscribe.